I always thought family meant having each other's backs, not being the person they stepped on to get ahead. But the moment my sister announced her third pregnancy, I realized I wasn't a sister to them. I was an unpaid employee. And when I finally said no, the masks didn't just slip, they shattered. The rain was tapping against the window of my small apartment, a sound that usually brought me peace. I had spent 3 years building this life, a quiet space, a steady job, and a routine that belonged only to me. I'm Lily Rose, and for a long time, I was the reliable one. In my family, that's just code for the person who doesn't complain when things get unfair. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was a text from my mother in the family group chat. "Big news tonight. Dinner at 7. Don't be late." I felt a familiar knot tighten in my stomach. Dinner at my parents' house was never just dinner. It was a stage for my sister, Sarah. Sarah lived life at 100 miles an hour, usually fueled by our parents' savings and a complete disregard for anyone else's schedule. When I arrived, the house smelled of roast chicken and tension. Sarah was already there, glowing in a way that signaled she had a secret. My mother was fluttering around her like she was royalty. "Lily, sit down," my mother chirped, barely looking at me as she placed a tray of drinks on the table. "We have something wonderful to celebrate." We sat, and before I could even take a bite of my salad, Sarah beamed. "We're adding another one to the brood. Baby number 3 is coming in December." My parents erupted in cheers. I smiled. I really did. I love my nieces, but I also knew what this meant. Sarah's first 2 children were practically raised by my mother, and by extension, me, whenever I was pressured into helping out. "That's great news, Sarah. Congratulations," I said softly. My mother leaned forward, her eyes locked on mine. The celebration felt like it had been a curated lead-up to this specific moment. "So we've been talking, Lily. Since Sarah will be so busy with the new baby and the toddlers, and since your job is mostly flexible remote work anyway, we've decided you'll be taking over the daytime child care for the newborn once Sarah's maternity leave ends." The room went silent. It wasn't a question. It wasn't a request for a favor. It was a verdict. "I'm sorry," I said, setting my fork down. My heart was thumping against my ribs. "You decided?" "Well, yes," Sarah said, as if she were explaining something to a child. "Mom is getting older and can't handle 3 kids under 5. Your family, Lily, and you're just there in that apartment. It makes the most sense." "It makes sense for you," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "But I have a career. I have deadlines. I can't run a nursery while I'm trying to work." My mother's face shifted. The warmth evaporated. "Lily Rose, don't be selfish. Your sister is struggling. We are a family, and this is what family does. We've already told the neighbors you'd be doing it. It's settled." I looked at my father, who remained focused on his plate, refusing to intervene. I looked at Sarah, who was already scrolling through stroller designs on her phone. "No," I said. The word felt heavy in the air. "What did you say?" my mother whispered. I said no. I won't be the nanny. I won't be the babysitter. I have my own life, and I am not available for this. The explosion didn't happen right away. Instead, it was a cold, sharp silence that told me I had just declared war on the only people I was supposed to trust. The silence following my no was louder than any scream could have been. My mother didn't yell. She just stared at me with a look of profound disappointment, as if I had personally betrayed every ancestor we had. Sarah, on the other hand, let out a sharp, mocking laugh. "You're kidding, right?" Sarah asked, tossing her phone onto the table. "I'm overwhelmed, as it is. Do you have any idea how hard it is to raise 2 kids while pregnant? And you're worried about your deadlines?" "I'm not worried about them, Sarah. I'm responsible for them," I countered. "My job pays my rent. It pays for the life I've built. I can't just put it on hold because you decided to have another child without a childcare plan." My mother slammed her hand onto the table, making the silverware rattle. "That is enough. Your sister's well-being is more important than some spreadsheets on a laptop. We raised you to be a person of character, Lily Rose. Where is your heart?" "My heart is fine, Mom. My boundaries are what's new," I said, standing up. I realized then that if I stayed, I'd eventually cave. That was the old Lily, the Lily who spent her weekends cleaning Sarah's house and her evenings running errands for my parents. I walked out of the house that night with their voices echoing behind me. I thought that would be the end of it, that they'd realize I was serious and find another way. But the next morning, the campaign began. My phone didn't stop buzzing. It started with soft guilt. Photos of my nieces playing with dolls, captioned with, "They miss their Auntie Lily. It's a shame she's too busy for family now." Then came the phone calls from distant relatives I hadn't spoken to in months. "Lily, dear," my Aunt Martha said during a surprise call, "I heard you're having a bit of a falling out with your mother. You know, life is short. You shouldn't let a little babysitting come between you and your sister. She's in a delicate state." They were gaslighting me. They were painting me as the villain of a story I hadn't even asked to be in. 2 days later, I heard a knock at my apartment door. It was 10 a.m. I was in the middle of a high-stakes Zoom meeting. I ignored it, but the knocking turned into a rhythmic pounding. I apologized to my clients, muted my mic, and opened the door. My mother stood there, holding a literal stack of parenting books and a schedule she had printed out. "I've worked it all out," she said, pushing past me into my living room. "You can work from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. Then the toddlers come here. You'll have a break when they nap, and then Sarah will pick them up by 5 p.m. It's perfectly manageable." I stared at her, stunned. She was physically invading my sanctuary to map out a life I had already rejected. "Mom, leave," I said, my voice trembling. "I am working, right now. I am in a meeting." "Tell them you have a family emergency," she dismissed me with a wave of her hand. "This is your family, Lily. This is your blood. If you can't do this for us, then don't expect us to be there when you need something." That was the moment the bridge started to burn. She wasn't asking for help. She was demanding ownership of my time. I realized that to them, my independence wasn't a success to be proud of. It was just a resource they hadn't tapped into yet. My mother left that day, but the air in my apartment felt heavy, like the walls themselves were closing in. I tried to dive back into my work, but the focus was gone. Every time my phone chimed, my heart did a painful somersault. I eventually turned it off and shoved it into a kitchen drawer. A week went by. I thought the silence meant they were finally moving on, but I should have known better. Silence in my family is usually just the calm before a much bigger storm. On Saturday morning, I decided to head to a local cafe just to get out of the house. As I was locking my front door, I saw Sarah's SUV pull into the parking lot. She didn't get out alone. My mother was with her, and in the back seat were my 2 nieces, ages 2 and 4. "What are you guys doing here?" Sarah hopped out, looking frazzled, her hair in a messy bun. "Lily, thank God you're home. I have a massive migraine, and Mom has a doctor's appointment she can't miss. We just need you to watch the girls for a few hours, just 3 hours tops." "Sarah, I told you." "It's an emergency, Lily," my mother interrupted, her voice rising so the neighbors could hear. "Are you really going to leave your pregnant sister on the sidewalk with 2 toddlers? What is wrong with you?" Before I could protest further, Sarah was already unbuckling the girls. They ran toward me shouting "Auntie Lily" with that pure innocent joy that makes it impossible to say no. I felt trapped. They knew exactly which buttons to push. They were using the kids as human shields against my boundaries. "Fine," I sighed, defeated. 3 hours, not a minute more. They didn't even say thank you. They just handed me a diaper bag and drove off before I could change my mind. The 3 hours turned into 6, then 8. By 7 p.m., the girls were exhausted and crying, and I was reaching my breaking point. I called Sarah. No answer. I called my mother, straight to voicemail. Frustrated, I opened Sarah's social media, thinking maybe she'd posted about being at the hospital. What I saw made my blood run cold. There was a post from 20 minutes ago. It was a photo of Sarah and my mother at a high-end spa resort 2 towns over. They were wearing white robes, holding glasses of sparkling cider, with the caption, "Much-needed Girls' Day. So glad we finally found a way to get some me time while the kids are in good hands. #family support, #blessed. They hadn't gone to a doctor. They had lied to my face, used my nieces as pawns, and were currently laughing at how easily they had tricked me. I sat on the floor of my living room, surrounded by scattered toys and the sound of a fussy toddler, and I felt a cold, hard clarity wash over me. The guilt was gone. The obligation was gone. The only thing left was the realization that I was being hunted by people who were supposed to protect me. I realized then that no wasn't going to be enough. I needed a plan that they couldn't manipulate. I didn't call them. I didn't text them. I didn't give them the satisfaction of a panicked message that they could ignore while they relaxed at the spa. Instead, I waited. I fed the girls, put them to sleep on my guest bed, and sat in the dark living room with the glow of my laptop as my only company. At 9:30 p.m., Sarah's SUV pulled into the driveway. She walked in, smelling like eucalyptus and expensive lotion, humming a tune. My mother followed behind her, looking refreshed and smug. "Oh, look at that. They're asleep. See, Lily? We told you that you were a natural," Sarah whispered, reaching for her car keys on my counter. "We'll just grab them and go. Thanks for being a lifesaver." "Sit down," I said. My voice was flat. No emotion, no anger. Just ice. "Lily, it's late. We really should—" "I saw the post, Mom," I interrupted, turning my laptop screen toward them. The photo of them at the spa was frozen in high definition. The doctor's appointment, the migraine, it was all a lie. Sarah's face went pale for a split second before she hardened her expression. "So, we needed a break. You have no idea how stressful my life is. A little white lie didn't hurt anyone." "It hurt our trust," I replied, "and it was the last time you'll ever use those children to manipulate me. I've made a decision." I handed them a printed document. It was a formal notice. I had contacted my landlord an hour earlier. I was breaking my lease, but that wasn't the part that made my mother gasp. "I've accepted a transfer at my company," I told them. "I'm moving to the corporate office 3 states away. My bags are already half packed. I leave in 2 weeks." "You can't do that," my mother shrieked, forgetting the sleeping children. "What about your sister? What about the baby? You're leaving us in the lurch." "No, Mom. I'm leaving a situation where I'm not respected," I said, standing up. "You didn't want a daughter or a sister. You wanted a solution to a problem Sarah created. Well, the solution is gone. From now on, if you want childcare, you can pay for it like everyone else." Sarah started to cry, not out of sadness, but out of pure, indignant rage. "You're ruining everything. I'm pregnant. How could you be so cruel?" "The cruelty was pretending to love me just so you could use me," I said, opening my front door. "Now take the girls and go. I have a lot of packing to do." As they dragged the crying, half-awake children out of my apartment, hurling insults over their shoulders, I felt a weight lift off my chest that I hadn't even realized I was carrying. They thought they had backed me into a corner. They didn't realize they had actually pushed me out the door. The drive to my new city felt like a long, deep exhale. For the first time in my life, my phone was silent because I wanted it to be, not because I was hiding. I had blocked my sister and mother temporarily, not out of hate, but to give myself the space to breathe without being suffocated by their demands. Settling into my new apartment was different this time. There were no family emergencies interrupting my move-in. No one was asking me to drop everything to run an errand. I sat on my new balcony, watching a city I barely knew, and realized that family isn't just about sharing a last name. It's about mutual respect. If the love is conditional on how much you can be used, then it isn't love, it's an arrangement. A few months later, I heard through an aunt that Sarah had to hire a full-time nanny, and my mother was complaining to anyone who would listen about how difficult Lily had become. I just smiled. Let them tell their version of the story. In my version, I finally learned that saying no to others was the only way to say yes to myself. I'm Lily Rose, and I'm finally living my own life. End question. Would you have moved away to save your peace? Or would you have stayed to help the kids? If you enjoyed this story, hit the subscribe button for more calm and realistic tales from Lily Calm Stories.